Welcome to That's Inclusive, where we talk about disability and what it means to live a full life engaging in our communities. What does that look like, and how can we work together to make our world a more inclusive place?
Cool. All right, we're recording, and like I just told my buddy Paul, who I've, by the way, known for like over 20 years, to all my fans listening at home. I don't know how any one human other than my parents and siblings has been able to put up with me for so long, but Paul and I have known each other since we were two little rugrats running around our family's respective lake cabins in New Hampshire, and have stayed friends ever since. So I am Blake, the social media assistant for the New Hampshire Council on Developmental Disabilities. For those of you who have not yet had the displeasure of getting to meet me yet, mostly kidding there. And Paul, you want to go ahead and just introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, I'm Paul Philben. I'm on a lot of social media as PT Philben. I am currently a writer's PA or support staff on the writer's room for The Night Agent, which dropped last month as of recording this, to a lot of success. I was diagnosed with autism, at I believe around age 4 or 5. At some point, my diagnosis was reevaluated to Asperger's, which is how I knew it growing up. I guess some people don't like that word anymore, but it's the word I knew, so that's how I identify as Aspie. Yeah, I'm excited to be here and to hopefully offer some insight. Insight.
Cool. Thank you. And by the way, guys, if you have not watched The Night Agent, having just finished it myself the other day, very entertaining. I would say it's very akin to the show 24. I don't know if you agree with that, Paul.
Yeah, that's a good comp.
Good, analogy, I guess. And so if you liked that show, you'll probably really like The Night Agent. But also just like seeing Paul's name in the credits on the premiere episode was pretty wild for me, because growing up, like I said, we've known each other for quite a while, and we always, joked and talked about him getting to Hollywood and doing this. And I think until it happens, it's all very theoretical, like most things in life. And then it happens, and you see it on screen, and you're like, oh shoot, I know that guy. That's pretty cool. So that was a wild moment for me.
It was funny because I looked for my credit and I couldn't find it. I assumed it just wasn't there, but you found it. So that was so funny.
It took meticulous pausing and playing of the button because Netflix is very aggressive with their speed in the credit once you get through the main producers and the cast, etc.
Which is weird because most people just don't watch the credits. You would think they would just let it play at a normal speed since they skip it usually anyway.
One would think. They actually have you start the next episode automatically unless you click the watch credits option button.
Yeah, exactly.
Really interesting. But I was like, I have a hunch I might see him in here, so I'm going to just spend a minute of my time and see if I can.
Yeah, I think my name came after the logos, which is why I missed it. But yeah.
So that was interesting. And, guys, I took a picture of it, sent it to Paul and his family and circulated it amongst people we know. And we were all like, oh my God. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, people freaked out on Facebook, which I hadn't been on in years. And, except for one hidden Hollywood assistant group. So I had to respond to people on Facebook for the first time in years. That was a wild experience.
Probably a lot of notifications back-ended waiting for you.
Yeah.
As most of the folks who are going to watch this video are aware, April, which has 2 days left in it, so I'm not late doing this project. I still get my stuff done, amazingly, is Autism Awareness Month, Autism Acceptance Month, for folks. And, wanted to talk to Paul, because he and I were long overdue for a chat anyways, and we're cooking up a visit in person out to LA, which would be pretty cool. I've been once, did all the tourist trap stuff, and I'm really excited to do proper LA this time. But we wanted to chat with Paul, because he works for Netflix, which is just really cool. I don't know many people personally that work for Netflix, so that was nice. And just to get his perspective on things he's seen in the industry, his experience breaking into the industry as somebody with autism, and some of that. So Paul, I'll let you kind of lead off. My first question is just kind of what's the vibes been for you, with autism, Asperger's in the film/TV industry?
Well, I've been pretty lucky with most of my interactions. There's some anxiety going into an industry like this that's driven so much by social connection, and having certain issues with like perceiving tone or not knowing like the implications of what you say before you say it. I also have problems with just like volume and like can I swear?
Yeah, I think most of the people watching this are adults.
Yeah. So my other issue being like my default expression being "fuck you," my default tone of voice being not particularly conciliatory. I have a loud, booming voice that I have trouble keeping in check sometimes. So there's always this anxiety that I'm like fucking something up or tripping up some social interaction, and of course people are too polite to tell you. I always try to tell people up front, like if I do something to offend you, just let me know. There hasn't been that much of an issue in this room in particular, but naturally, like my first job out here was editing on Keeping Up with the Kardashians. Not what I wanted to do, but it was a fine first gig to have, and there are some funny stories. But there was a point where my supervisor had to pull me aside, and I was an assistant story editor, and my colleague, who was also an assistant story editor, there were two on every team, had apparently gone to my supervisor and said that I had sounded like very like angry, like commanding, and just what I thought was making simple requests. And I don't blame her. That was just, I was glad that she just took me aside and just checked in with me. After I left that job, I had like a stint for a while where I was just doing like odd jobs, like Uber and stuff. And the pandemic hit, and the first like nearly a year of that was just hell of not being able to get any work, as a lot of people weren't, and not being able to access unemployment because it was such an overloaded disaster. But at some point during the pandemic, like I think that it was already like 2021 at this point, I get a notification from an organization called oh, damn, I can't remember what they're called. If I remember what they're called, I'll say. But they were a like placement agency that specialized in people on the spectrum, and they were just starting to like implement their work into like Hollywood jobs. They were used to like doing it with like just like office work, but they were starting to do it with Hollywood jobs. And I get a email from them saying that like this one show wants autistic PAs in particular, and thank God I answered that email because it led me to where I am. And it turned out it was for Jason Kadam's show. Jason Kadam's is the creator of shows like Friday Night Lights and Parenthood.
I recognize the name. I loved Parenthood, so that's how.
Yeah, and having watched Parenthood, you know that there's an autistic character on that show, Max.
Yes, exactly.
Who's very heavily based on Kadam's son.
Interesting.
This is all public, but so this new show that he was developing or getting ready to shoot was it was about three autistic roommates. It was called As We See It, and the like autistic roommates were played by actual autistic people. He had autistic people on the writing staff, so he had a very big-hearted investment in like inclusion in this show. And so I end up working for the show as like a COVID PA, so just like handling like handing people their like proximity badges or whatever, so that if anybody gets sick, that we know like who's sick and who's not, and who was exposed to who. Boring part of the story. Anyway, at some point during the show, though, I was given access to the pilot, which had been shot before the pandemic, and I had a pretty strong reaction to it. And I ended up telling this woman who was on the crew, like I got to meet basically everyone on the crew because everyone came for COVID tests every day.
Right.
And I didn't know who she was at the time. But like I just tell her that I had this strong reaction to the pilot, specifically this scene where the main character's father sits him down for dinner, and says like, you need to go ask for your job back, because he like basically did the ask me thing and told his boss you're an idiot without like being at all self-aware. And he says, no, I don't want that job. And he's like, well, do you want me to support you for the rest of your life? And he's like, yeah, kind of. And he says, well, I can't, I have cancer. And before I go, I need to know you'll be okay. I need to know you'll be able to hold down a job, that you'll be able to, get a girl, that you'll be happy when I'm gone. And that really, it made me think of my own father. Not in that we had a conversation that stark, because as you know, he's alive, well, healthy.
Well, also named Paul for the folks at home.
Yeah, PT stands for Paul the Third, so my father's name is also Paul. But anyway, so I had a strong reaction to that, because it made me think of like all the things my dad did and all the concern he showed when I was young, like trying to get me to pursue girls, like doing this to teach me proper eye contact. So I had that reaction. I tell this woman, Elaine, not knowing who she was. She asked me to write it down in like a letter format, just to show it to people, to like affirm that people in my situation could have a positive reaction to the show. What I didn't realize at the time was that she was one of the most important consultants on the show, because she's like a relatively well-known acting coach, as well as an autism inclusion advocate, because her son is on the spectrum. And the people she showed it with included the producers of the show. So I ended up having conversations with mainly Jenny Mullen, who was Jason Katims' head of development at the time, and a brief conversation with Jason Katims, and I formed that connection just through just being lucky enough to express myself to the right person. Like, it was an astronomical chance. And it was through Jenny that I ended up getting a writer's PA position on this show, The Night Agent. Coincidentally, during the interview, like, I told Sean this whole story, that my current boss, Sean Ryan, this whole story, and it turned out he knew people on the autism spectrum as well. And it was just, like, astronomical, like, concurrence of events that people talk all the time about, like, in this industry, about, like, how no one's story of how they make it into a particular place is replicable. Like one person's story is only one person's story. There's no, like, one select path. And just to like clarify something, getting support staff job on a writer's room is basically impossible. Like, they don't post these jobs publicly. Everybody freaking wants them. The fact that I was lucky enough to just have this opportunity because Jenny knew someone who worked on the show and knew that they needed a PA, it's astronomical good luck. I think I earned my place here, but it was also extremely lucky. So I would say in the past couple of years, I've had just this string of both working under Katims as a member of, like, his shooting crew, and working more directly with Sean Ryan, two legendary writers who are both men who I can't speak of highly enough. They both have hearts of gold. And they both have a connection with the community. I'm extremely fortunate that I've ended up in really good environments. You hear stories about some of the, like, worst people in Hollywood. Like, there are certain writers' rooms that are really toxic, that don't treat assistants well. I feel very fortunate to be where I am. And I guess, like, whenever I tell people this story, because, like, people naturally want to know how you get into a writer's room, and I'm like, it start with an autism diagnosis. I don't know. I basically just say that you want to be honest with people, and speak your truth. Like, okay, Integrate was the organization that, like, helped me get that first job. I asked a woman who worked there, whose daughter was on the spectrum, like, how honest I should be about my autism diagnosis. Like when I applied for jobs early out here, never gotten a job out here through a job application. It's always been meeting someone who knows something.
With old networking.
Yeah, all networking. But I always struggle with, like, should I identify myself as a disabled person? Would they want to bother with me? And what she said was, if someone's going to not hire you because of your autism diagnosis, you probably don't want to work with them anyway. And it was precisely because I talked about who I was, what, as we see it, which unfortunately didn't get renewed, what that show meant to me, what that meant to my family. I have a ton of funny anecdotes about that show if we have like time for it. But anyway, it's because I was upfront with like who I am, how that's affected me as a writer, that I'm here. I would not have gotten here if not for my autism in a weird way. So, I like, it's astronomical luck as well, but, I've been very fortunate that this aspect of myself that's obviously very core to who I am is a big part of the reason that I'm here, and, hopefully fairly soon looking around the corner at getting a script on one of Sean's shows. So.
Oh, I'll be looking forward to and definitely watching that. And I always joked with Paul, guys. I was like, I think I would make a great extra on a show. It would depend on the show, but I would be a fantastic extra. And as you've just heard, it's all networking. So now I have the network, in place. But something you said really piqued my interest, and is going to make me throw out one of my questions and actually bring in an organic question that came to mind. Was when your reaction to it was As We See It was the show you said. To As We See It, I think my question is based on that. When you watch projects like, that come out that feature people with autism, with Asperger's, whatever, do you find they are mostly genuine? Do you find it's like a generalization of people on the spectrum? What's your initial, what's the overall vibes of that, if there is any? Maybe it's very individualistic, and it's not a one-size-fits-all reaction.
Yeah.
But in general, I'd say, I guess the question is, do you think Hollywood mostly gets it right? And I'm doing this with like heavy air quotes, because gets it right based on individual taste.
Yeah, so that's a kind of a complicated question.
I'm known for
so
that.
As We See It did put forward more effort towards getting it right than most shows. Like I said, they cast people who were on the spectrum and playing characters with very similar levels of need, which was really good. And they even hired autistic actors to play non-autistic characters just for the hell of it. And not that there weren't like issues with the show, but the stuff they got right, they got really right. Like, one little anecdote I remember was my sister watching the show with her boyfriend, or now fiance, whose name is also Paul.
Fiance, who's also we're just bringing in more Pauls, all the Pauls.
Yeah. So she reacted to the main character basically saying something rude. I can't remember what scene it was. It might have been like when he's playing cards with a bunch of old ladies and they say, "Oh, you're really good at this game." And he's like, "No, you're just terrible at it." And she said that reminded her of me, and her fiance was like, "What are you talking about? PT is nothing like this." And she like pauses it and like explains to him, like, this is him to a T when he was 8. Like, he
100%.
has, come so far or whatever. And she told this little anecdote about how one time she asked me how I was doing, and I said, fine. And she asked, do you want to know how I'm doing? And I said, no. Which was like a very the most autistic thing. I have no memory of this. I wouldn't do that now. But, yeah, my symptoms used to be a lot more obvious. Like, one thing I do kind of want to see is, I'm probably going to go through a laundry list here, but like, one thing I do kind of want to see is the experience of someone who passes, quote unquote, because that's a whole different struggle. Like, so the way I've explained it to people is, so I prefer the term high need versus low need versus high functioning and low functioning, because high functioning, like, to most people has always meant like, oh, so you pass for normal enough so that I can like ignore your needs and not feel bad about it and not feel like ableist. Like, I have needs, I just don't have as many needs as some other people on the spectrum.
Sure.
So like, it's a daily struggle with the fact that, like, I know at any time that I can make some sort of mistake that I'm not even aware of that will throw people off a lot because because, you know, they won't necessarily know that I'm on the spectrum. It's a lot more comforting. Like, I have a couple friends out here who, like, know, and they're cool with it, and we have, like, a rapport that makes sense to everyone involved, but I don't necessarily have time to do that with every coworker. I don't have time to establish that rapport with, like, every person I meet at a networking event. And that's a struggle. And I would like to see more of that. In terms of, like, how the representation has worked now, Hollywood has a real fascination with the archetype of the savant. You know, like your Rain Mans, or when you're talking about the more, like, Asperger's side, like, even if they don't explicitly say it, like Sheldon from Big Bang Theory falls into this category. The Benedict Cumberbatch iteration of Sherlock, and that's sort of come to define Asperger's, particularly those last two, in the minds of a lot of people. And I do think that was actively harmful, because it gives the perception that all Aspies have, like, very specific traits where they're, like, very cerebral, purposefully rude and condescending. Asexual is a big one. Like, that, like, these characters are all portrayed as more or less asexual, or that they have to, like, overcome their asexuality, even though there's no correlation between autism and asexuality, just autism and awkwardness. So that sort of archetype, I found, not that there aren't, like, here's the thing, it's not that there aren't Aspie or autistic people like that, but it's the fact that that is the trope that so many writers fall back on because it's narratively convenient. Like, you have a character that can both solve a lot of problems because they're brilliant, but also creates a lot of problems because they're completely inept in regard to social interactions. Like, I mean, that's the essence of, like, a lot of narrative television, just trying to create problems and solve problems in a systemic fashion over and over again. So it's obvious why this character type is so prevalent, but there's a wide spectrum of people with autism, Asperger's, whatever, and I would like to see a broader representation so that people don't have a very narrow view of what it means to be autistic or Aspie, because typically when people hear the word autistic, they see Dustin Hoffman's character in Rain Man, and when they hear Aspie, they see, like, Sheldon, who's one of the most annoying characters in the history of television. But
I actually haven't watched that one, and now you're not really selling it to me, so I don't think I will watch it.
Yeah, what's annoying about that one is they say, oh, we aren't, like, pinning it on anything. Like, obviously he's, like, different, but we're not going to, like, put a label on it. And I'm like, shut the fuck up. It's Asperger's. Like, we know what, like, lazy tropes you're leaning on here, but yeah. Luckily I don't want to write for sitcoms, so I don't care if I piss off Chuck Lorre. But I'm sure he's a good guy. I just don't like that one show. I love 2.5 Men. It probably hasn't aged well, but I liked it at the time. So yeah, that I would say with regard to representation in Hollywood, there's people who are genuinely trying to push things in the right direction. I will say it's more important to me that it's represented well insofar as, like, the actual symptoms, as opposed to putting a big emphasis on getting autistic actors, although doing both is the best case scenario. And I don't know, but I have a couple scripts with autistic characters in it. By my scripts, I don't know. But definitely, in general, listen to writers on the spectrum, because there's probably a lot of them out here who are undiagnosed as well. So,
Sure, and we got about 10 minutes left on the free recording, but I do have, one, I guess.
We could always, they don't, they don't, check to see if you just do it again. And I don't really have anywhere to be until like 8, so.
I gotta do that Rent performance soonish with Kira, which I'm really excited about.
Right. Yeah.
I love Rent. I think it's a great soundtrack, so I'm really interested to see that performance. But you kind of touched on a thing that itched my brain a bit, and I think something that, and I'm gonna use my boss's phrase for it, that we hate to see when it comes to the disability community, is stories that really lean into like inspiration porn. And that's a direct quote from my boss, so I'm okay to say it. They're like, oh my God, look at this autistic person, or look at this disabled person doing this normally like mundane thing that, is not necessarily special, but they're like, oh my God, it's so amazing because they did it. And my experience with the disability community is they're like, we don't want to be special. Like, we're just doing the same thing everybody else is doing. Like, treat us just like you and everybody else. I feel like it's important to have more representation, to your kind of point, in the writer's room on these projects to avoid those tropes. It sounds like this agency that, the booking agency, we'll call it, that got you kind of, placement agency. Is there a broader effort on that front in Hollywood? Are they just getting it? And like, how's that been going over the last couple of years?
Well, in terms of representation in general, there's been a big push in Hollywood recently, both for like PR and like genuine like idealistic reasons. I think it was like 10 years ago where I can't remember the exact stats, but it was something absurd where like 90% of writers were white and 83% of writers were white men specifically. It's much, much better now in terms of like genuine parity with like, not that the U.S. is the only place in the world, but it's much closer to being in parity with the U.S. population, at least in terms of like gender and racial demographics. Not perfect, but much closer to what it should be than what it was like 10 years ago. I mean, both from just like the perspective of trying to like do the right thing, but also just like, you get better stories when you have like a broader range perspective. Like if you exclusively hire white guys who went to school in the Northeast, you're only going to get so many interesting stories. Whereas like if you hire a diverse set of voices, not just in terms of like demographics, but like I would hope that any writer's room would include people of all like cultural backgrounds. That includes like I don't know, like a hick from a hick from West Virginia. A hick might be a mean word, but you get what I mean. Yeah. Someone who comes from an unprivileged background in West Virginia, regardless of their ethnicity. What I will say is I haven't seen as much of a push for that in terms of neurodiversity, at least broadly in the industry. I remember one time in college there was this like screenwriting contest for diverse voices, and I attended like their meeting where they were like answering questions about it, and I asked if neurodiversity counted as diversity for like purposes of applying for this, and she said yes, if you also have one of the other qualifications such as race, gender identity, blah 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 blah. And I was literally just like, you could have just said no. Like,
it's the right way of saying no.
Yeah, no would have been a much shorter and respectful answer. Thank you very much. But I think partially because it's like invisible and like you can't put it on like a pamphlet or like have if you have a picture of a writer's room and like you have like and you say this is a diverse writer's room, like if there's like someone like me who's a white autistic guy that doesn't like push you towards that doesn't like help your narrative that you're trying to promote, which I think reflects that while there are people who are doing this for honest reasons, some of it is just PR, but also because like it might not occur to people as much. Like I don't want to say that everyone who neurodiversity doesn't occur to them is like just an inherently dishonest person. But like, I do think that representation, particularly in a storytelling industry, is important because everyone's stories deserve to be told. And that includes not just people on the autism spectrum, but people with other neurodivergencies. And I would like to see a bit more of that. So
For sure. The last question, actually, you answered it earlier, so I'm going to change it up on this again. And, this one, answer it as much as you're legally allowed to. We don't want to get you fired. I will not be responsible for that. What, for the fans at home, can you give on the Night Agent Season 2 potential? When can we expect anything fun coming out of that project as far as release dates, trailers, whatever?
Well, okay, so the current
expected windows, keeping in mind, for folks that don't know, the writers are 99.99% going on strike, so there may be
the current date is April 28th. The writer's strike is expected to begin on Tuesday the 2nd. So if that strike happens, everything is put on pause until the end of the strike, which the last strike was 4 months, but that was considered a pretty long one. 100 days, so about 4 months. Or a little more than 3 months, actually. Yeah, a little more, 3 months. So I expect it to happen, and anything that happens there will inevitably delay the Night Agent. I think they said they wanted it released of summer next year, but of course that's aspirational. As for like how the show will do, I honestly, without being able to give you like anything of substance, I feel even more confident that this will be a really strong season of television than I did last time. Not that there wasn't a lot to be excited about last time, but there was a goal to like try to get as much done as possible before the strike, partially because Sean wanted to get people paid. And we kept at a really fast pace, and it's been incredible to watch. And I think people will be very happy with the final product without being able to say like anything about it.
Cool. And for folks, references at home, and then I'll close it out. The last writer's strike, to my knowledge, was a fair number of years ago, but a very prominent movie that you would all remember is 007, James Bond, Quantum of Solace was a production of the writer's strike. And you look no further than how critical writers are than if you watch that movie and go, man, this thing is stitched together in various ways.
Two other big examples of that are, I enjoyed this movie a lot at the time, but it was because I was just happy with loud explosions. Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen. There's a lot of stupid fun to be had in that movie, but there's basically no script. But the other big example that I always give people, like most people who are into television at all have watched Breaking Bad. And I just ask people, did you notice that season 1 doesn't have a finale? It kind of just dissipates, and then you move on to season 2. And they're like, yeah, it was like writer's strike. They just put their pens down, did not continue to make the show.
Exactly. Well, Paul, thank you. And folks, I am going to keep Paul on for a little bit longer just to shoot the breeze with him because we got a lot of catching up to do. But I want to thank you for hopping on and talking about your perspective and giving a peek behind the curtain of Hollywood for folks in the disability community. And folks, this will be up once I take the 1 billion years it requires to transcribe all this, and we have that done. This will be up on the council's website. It'll be up on the social media channels, and it'll be shared with Paul's parents, who I'm sure are going to go ballistic that we got to do this in a professional capacity. And we'll hit pause/stop recording. But thank you, everybody, for tuning in.
Thank you for joining us today. I'm Vanessa Blaze, and this was a production of the New Hampshire Council on Developmental Disabilities, produced by Isadora Rodriguez-Legendre and Vanessa Blaze, with many thanks to Josh Hardy and the rest of the crew here at Concord TV. We love to have guests with differing perspectives. These views are personal and do not necessarily represent those of the DD Council.